Hi. Like probably many of you, I'm kind of trying to figure out how to be good to myself at the same time as do my job and um, keep other things going. And a couple things I've figured out, which are no brainers, which is I'm trying to reduce my consumption of news and not go to that first thing in the morning. Today, I took a little bit of time before my work hours, my big commute, to the next room. And I started this book that's been on my shelf for kind of a long time, Dungeness, by a fellow Bedazzled Ink press author, Karen Polinsky, and it's really great. So that's been nice. But the other thing I've been doing, largely because I've been reading to my mom a little bit over FaceTime or through her window and reporting out that FaceTime seems to be a better way to do it. Uh, and she has been closing her eyes a lot recently. I'm noticing, I think it's in part because her vision's getting quite a bit worse. And so I'm finding that I'm going to read funny books because then she laughs and I know she hasn't fallen asleep. Or I also say, are you still awake, Mom? But anyway, I've kind of, the book I started reading to her yesterday was Mrs Piggle Wiggle. And I mentioned it to my daughter, Emily, who's in Boston right now. Yay, feeling a little healthier. And I said, Emily, do you remember this book? And she said, of course, I love that book. So I told her that this one's for her. But I'm also finding a lot of people, a little kind of younger than me, have never heard of this book. My kids remember the story and the movies that we would check out from the library too. And so I thought it would be fun to read the very first chapter of this one. There are several of them. Ooh, this is Mrs. Piggle Wiggle's Magic. This book was published in 1949 by Betty MacDonald. And what I'm kind of enjoying about this is that there is a handwritten note in this book, Patty Montgomery, 1955, which is before she had children, and yet she was a teacher. And so I know, and when I talked to Mom, she did think she remembered reading this to her second grade class. So it has of course, it looks a bit like this, and very gender, very much the era in terms of what women did and what men did, and you'll see that. But I thought it would be fun to read the very first chapter. So it's a little bit of, this is the first book, and it's an introduction to Mrs. Piggle Wiggle's Magic. Of course, the reason that all the children in our town like Mrs. Piggle Wiggle is because Mrs. Piggle Wiggle likes them. Mrs. Piggle Wiggle likes children. She enjoys talking to them, and best of all, they do not irritate her. When Molly O'Toole was looking at the colored pictures in Mrs. Piggle Wiggle's big dictionary, and just happened to be eating a candy cane at the same time, and drooled candy cane juice on the colored pictures of gems, and then forgot and shut the book so the pages were all stuck together, Mrs. Piggle Wiggle didn't say, "Such a careless little girl can never, ever look at the colored pictures in my big dictionary again." Nor did she say, "You must never look at books when you're eating." She said, "Let's see. I think we can steam those pages apart, and then we can wipe the stickiness off with a little soap and water, just like this. Now see, it's just as good as new. There's nothing as cozy as a piece of candy and a book." "Oh, don't look so embarrassed, Molly. I almost drool every time I look at those gems. Which one is your favorite?" "I think mine is the lapis." When Dickie Williams, who was showing off for Patsy by riding his wagon with his eyes shut, crashed through Mrs. Piggle Wiggle's basement window and landed in the coal bin, Mrs. Piggle Wiggle laughed so much she had to sit down on the front steps and wipe her eyes with her apron. Dickie was awfully scared and was going to sneak out the basement door and go home, but Mrs. Piggle Wiggle, still laughing, leaned through the broken window and said, "Hand me that putty knife and that can of putty off the shelf, and then go get me that pane of glass leaning against the wall over there by the furnace. Thank you very much. Now watch carefully, Dickie, because putting in window glass is something that every boy should know how to do, especially boys who ride wagons with their eyes closed. When Marilyn Matson was helping Mrs. Piggle Wiggle serve tea, dropped and broke her brown teapot, she said, "Well, that's the luckiest thing I've ever known. You didn't get a drop of hot tea on you, and you broke that nasty teapot. With the one with the leaky spout that I've hated for 15 years. Tomorrow I'll go to town and buy a new one. I think I'll get pink, and I'm going to test the spout before I buy it." "But what about the tea?" cried Marilyn, wiping her tears on the sleeve. "Oh, make it in the coffee pot," said Mrs. Piggle Wiggle, "and we'll call it toffee." Let's see, should I keep going here? How long have we been going? Oh, this is getting pretty long. So I just want to tell you one last thing. I'm not going to finish this, but I will have to read this one. When Susan Gray came staggering over with a plate of the first cookies she had ever made for Mrs. Piggle Wiggle, Mrs. Piggle Wiggle didn't take one look at the tannish gray lumps and say, "No, thank you." She said, "Why, Susan Gray, you smart girl. 8 years old and already making cookies. You're going to make someone a very fine wife." Okay, so I'll stop there. So obviously it's a bit dated, but I do adore Mrs. Piggle Wiggle, and you may remember she has all these cures. So there's the bad table manners cure, and let's see, what else do we have in here? Some that you may remember if you're my age or older than me, I would imagine. I do remember the Tattletale cure. I really remember that one, and the interrupters, the never want to go to schooler, the what'll I doers. That's probably something that if you have school-age kids right now, you're probably hearing that one. So I will have to, you just let me know if you want me to do a little private reading for you sometime on that. Okay, enough. You can hear the breeze outside. It's beautiful. I'm just kind of happy to get a few moments outside now. And sending love to everybody. And yes, it is definitely the time to read some books. Those of you that have time to do that. And I'm very sending lots of love to some of you that have so much going on that you don't have time to pick up a book. We'll talk to you again.